Welcome back to the Beyond the Balance Sheet podcast, where inspiring stories meet meaningful financial insight. And today's episode is about something that we don't talk about often, and that is starting over later in life and what it looks like to reinvent your career into your 40s while raising young kids and managing all those financial and personal responsibilities and building a future at the same time. We're going to ask all of these questions here today with Dave Gorwitz. It's great to have you on the podcast. You're an attorney with Murphy Desmond here in Madison, and you took a non-traditional path to law, going back to school later in life while balancing all that life brings towards us, and a passion for sailing, which we're going to talk about as well. Dave, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with the turning point. So you go back to school, you're going back to law school after 40. Now that's a big decision. What got you there?
You know, I always thought that I wanted to be a lawyer, going way back. It just was something I wanted to do. And unfortunately, as an undergrad, I kind of majored in marching band and jingles. And so my undergraduate grades weren't good enough to get me into a quality law school, honestly. And I wound up pursuing an MBA and did that, and then went to work for, it was CUNA Mutual at the time, doing management consulting for credit unions and strategic planning right after the financial industry got deregulated in the Reagan administration. That dates me. And I did that for a while. And it was great. Got to travel a lot, meet fantastic people, and polish my business chops up a little bit. And but I was on the road all the time. And I was looking forward to not being on the road all the time, and was having lunch with one of my coworkers at CUNA Mutual at the time, who owned a mom and pop sailboat dealership in Madison here on the west side. And they had started their boat dealership as a hobby. And there's a local ski area as well called Tyrol Basin. And the name of the boat dealership was Tyrol Marine. And the two families went in it together and figured, well, hey, we'll do boats in the summer and skiing in the winter. What a great combination. And I'm thinking, yeah, that sounds right. Well, it turns out they weren't compatible at all, because the busiest times of year were spring and fall, with big overlap, where the ski industry is, you're hiring everybody for the winter and getting your chairlifts all unmothballed. And right at the time, all the boats are coming out of the water and getting winterized and put away. Spring was the exact opposite in the boat business. You're going to boat shows and everybody wants their boat in the spring, and it's the exact same time when the ski industry has something to do, right? They're packing everything up for the summer and putting it away. So it just didn't work out, and they wound up splitting their businesses. And I wound up over lunch. You were commiserating. I was commiserating that I was traveling all the time, and my coworker was commiserating that he was in the boat business but never had time to use his boat. And he said, "You want to buy my business?" And I said, "Okay." Just like that, I was in the boat business. We literally went over to the shop, counted the boats. I signed his floor plan loan, took it over from the bank. He went down with a clipboard and a calculator and a six-pack and said, "Okay, how much for the drill press? How much for the cans of paint on the shelf?" And so I got into the boat business that way, and did that while I was also pursuing my sailing hobby. So that was the first business I owned. Did that for a while until one of my good customers, who was the former district attorney here in Madison, and he had started his own law firm and switched teams. He was on the defense side, and he was defending licensed professionals, bankers, accountants, realtors, people with professional licenses, other lawyers. And he came in the shop. We met that way. He came in to buy a boat. I wouldn't sell one to him. He had never been in a sailboat before, but he had an office on the lake, thought it would be cool. So we met him and got to know he and his wife, and did some vacations together on boats and whatever. But one day he said, "Hey, we should practice together." And I said, "Hell, you got a problem. I'm not a lawyer." He said, "Oh, don't worry about that. Just go to law school." Well, I don't know. I got a pretty good gig here. I own my business. I'm playing with boats. And he said, and I said, hell, if you don't finish at the top of your class in law school, you don't have like the pick of what city you want to be in or what area of law you're going to be in. And I didn't really think being the assistant public defender in a small town in Wisconsin was a step up. And he goes, no, you don't understand. You just come in and we'll be partners straight from day one. And so before I ever went to law school, a lot of the risk was de-risked, right? I had a job waiting for me at the back end of that. So I said, okay, let's roll with it. I took the LSAT, the entrance exam for law school, on the Saturday after 9/11, 2001.
Wow.
Try to focus when you're doing that. Right?
Yeah.
The world was kind of upside down, but that's when I did that. And wound up getting waitlisted at UW, where I was on speed dial for donations. And I was an undergrad here and everything, but Madison was looking for maybe a different kind of candidate. People that want to change the law and we're really into the philosophy of law and things versus actually doing the practice of law. And I wound up at Marquette for a year, top of my class there, never been there before. But that first year at Marquette was scary because that's when my daughter was born. So we had a newborn at home, our first, and I was commuting from Madison to Milwaukee every day. I had hired a manager for the boat business because I wanted to see if law school would work out first. So that was how I got from where I started to 2002 being in law school. And rolling from there, I wound up transferring back to UW and finished my last 2 years here in Madison.
It's interesting because you talked about being a business owner and then you make this transition and, Marquette was a new experience. You think you cleared all these hurdles. And then when you make this big career decision, all of a sudden you realize, there's maybe just like you were in your 20s, it's like, I'm starting this all over again. So for you and your wife, Lori, this was an emotional decision, but Nate, maybe we want to talk about a little bit the financial things you're thinking about during this change.
Yeah, I think just listening to Dave's story, which is an incredible story, is just that, he was at the UW, which is amazing. He got an education that was very diversified. He didn't feel like he was the best student. He got into a business. He learned it. He did it well. He was able to execute it. And it's interesting that he combined kind of the transactions of buying, selling with boats. And now he's a mergers and acquisitions lawyer that, helps people buy businesses. And so it's interesting to me because in finance, especially in financial planning, it's not an exactly precise field. It's almost like sailing a boat. You just have to make sure that it's kind of going the right direction. And if there's some storms happen, you always are kind of doing little micro adjustments. And it's really interesting to see that, in your field. I'm actually kind of curious, how does the sailing kind of analogy work with like mergers and acquisitions? Like what do you even fill up the sail to even go?
In business and in sailing, right? You take your experience that you've gained in life and you try to predict the future, and you do a rotten job of it because nobody is good at predicting the future. But you just try to be a little better at that than other people. Right. So in sailing, we do that all the time. Right? We read weather forecasts and which way is the wind going to shift? Is it going to be windier or not windier? Who's out there that we're competing against? What's our competition in the marketplace? And then you adapt. You react and you adapt and you try to stay ahead of it. When I'm sailing, I try to play the game before the game ever gets played. Right? I sail that race in my head before we ever go around the buoys with the other boats. No, it never works out like I planned it, but at least I've run the exercise and now I'm adapting to changing my plan as I go.
So Dave, let's go back to making this big decision. And I'm sure you knew someone was going to say this, but navigating some really interesting waters, which is really what you're looking at when you've got a family, you're a business owner, and now you're going to do this whole life pivot. How do you manage that emotionally and with your kids and your family?
Well, the kids were just coming around at the time, right? So that was all going to be brand new to us. The The risk, of course, was a little de-risked, like I told you, because I would have a job at the end of the day if I, made this change. So that helped a lot because Lori, my wife, is very risk averse by nature. But, sailing in business, we're trying to predict the future. We get our weather forecasts. We build on our experience that we've gained over a lifetime, and we try to do our best to figure out how to get from A to B doing that and adapt and adjust as you go. And business is exactly the same way. You use your experience. You try to predict the future. Nobody's that great at predicting the future, so you try to do it just a little bit better than other people. You're going to make mistakes. You have to be willing to do that and own them and learn from them and adapt and go forward. And so it works. It's the same skill set, I think, in both.
Yeah. So that's a lot to carry. And how do you establish priorities during this time when you've got all these moving pieces?
So I think my priority was sleep, right? I was getting up at about 30 every morning to drive to Milwaukee, beat rush hour traffic, go to my law classes at Marquette, try to use the time as best I could between classes to get the reading done and do all the prep. Hey, I was paying tuition out of my pocket, and it wasn't cheap. So I was committed to going to class and doing the work. That just became number one to me. And then when I got home late afternoon, it was time with Lori and Samantha when she was just teeny tiny, right? And so I didn't spend a lot of time in the evenings, doing law school stuff. That was family time, and then it was back up the next morning and rinse and repeat.
It's a whole new definition of wearing multiple hats, right?
Absolutely.
Scholar by day, dad by night, and partner wherever you can throughout the entire process.
And I still own the business.
Yeah.
I had hired a manager to run the business, but I still owned the business. And if law school was going to prove to work out, then I was going to need to also sell the business.
No, it's interesting from a financial point of view. So you made this big change, but you didn't kind of fully commit. You kind of kept a toe back in the water in case you needed to go back. But so when you're kind of like, I'm trying to step away from a business, obviously the person managing wouldn't run it exactly like you did. So was it hard letting go, or is there something that it was hard to delegate, something like that?
No, it was really easy.
Really?
Once I let go, I realized that a lot of the things that I had micromanaged along the way, I thought too highly of myself. Okay. Nobody can do it but me. It really quickly, I realized there's people that can do this better than me. And I was fortunate to have a really good team, and didn't feel like I needed to be there to be looking over their shoulder at all. And it worked out just fine.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. So that's really neat. So I have a question for you. So now you're a mergers and transactions lawyer. So you have two companies, usually one's buying and usually one's selling. So usually that's kind of the initial part is a difficult conversation to have because people are kind of like not as trusting. They're feeling a little vulnerable. There's a little bit of stress. What kind of like things that translate from that financial field, getting that from that psychological base is analogous to your field?
Well, I think I was able to, especially with the smaller businesses, where it's a family business, the people, everything they've got is invested in that business, right?
Yeah.
And maybe they're on the sell side and looking forward to transitioning out. I was there with my boat business. I did that. I built a business. It was mine. It got bigger. We bought real estate. We put up buildings. And so I could relate to what was going on and the emotional attachment you have to your business. And at the same time, having represented a lot of buy-side people, they don't care about your warm and fuzzies at all. They got a spreadsheet. They know how much they can afford to invest so that they can make money on the back end. And it's purely financial transaction from the buy side almost all the time. And the buyer is almost always a much bigger company that has had experience buying businesses and spinning them off. And you're dealing with mom and pops a lot. Now I have much bigger sell side clients as well. But there's still an attachment they have to them. We don't deal with public companies on the south side at all. My clients are all private market, closely held companies. And so there's an attachment. And most of them have not been through a transaction before. So we sit and talk about what it was like when I did mine.
Dave, I want to get to the sailing metaphor again in a minute when it comes to financial planning that Nate will expand on. But, if somebody's listening to this right now feeling like, I don't know, I'm also in my 40s right now, and is it too late for me to make a change? What would you tell that person?
I've been a lawyer for 25 years.
Wow.
That's a career, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't go to law school till I was 40. You've got time to do different things. You get up every day and you go to your life. You don't go to your job. And so you better like what you're doing. And I kind of been there, done that with the consulting, been there, done that with owning a small business and building it, and always being behind the cash flow curve, right? Because I was growing faster than I could afford to support that. And so it was just time to try something else. And when the opportunity for me came up to do the law thing, Nate, you pointed out, hey, you kept one foot. Yeah, of course. I'm going to keep my options open. I was going to go all in with law school, but I wanted it out. I needed that escape hatch. If it didn't work, I could always go back to where I was. So, it worked out. I liked it. So my advice to people, it's not too late. In fact, I think for something like what I did, and it was law school, it's the game isn't as fair as it would. I had an advantage over my classmates who were in their 20s and hadn't had careers yet, and were worried about things other than school. They were worried about their social lives and meeting people and going out and entertaining themselves. And they were really wicked smart people in law school at both schools I went to. But maybe their priorities were a little different. So with my eye on the ball, I learned pretty quick, hey, do the work, go to class. And all of a sudden you're ahead of half of your competition just by doing that. Mm-hmm. And then, so now you're competing with a smaller pool for those top spots. And so, yeah, I think you're in a strong position to go back to school later. Absolutely. And then you come off the other end with a leg out as well.
In this conversation, we kind of focus on just on the buying and selling of business. But I like to kind of make sure that we have the full spectrum. So a lot of people are like, oh, I have the angst of starting a new business. I don't know where to start. Obviously having a lawyer like you to start with be amazing. And then I see the other side of the spectrum. They're like, I'm going to retire at this time of date. I'm just going to close off the lights. And some people don't even realize they have a business to sell. So I was just wondering if you could, go from like both the infancy to the M&A transaction and to, do I have something to sell? Like, some people just turn off the lights and they're done, and they actually could have sold something. So
that's exactly right. People tend to, and I found this over the years, they work in their business and not on their business. If I ask somebody, what do you do? They say, I sell widgets that I make. And I find that if I can shift the paradigm a little and have them look at, no, you're not in the widget business. You're in the business business. Your job is to build value in this business so that it has value to somebody else down the road. And it could be any kind of business. And so once people start getting accepting the reality that they're working, their product is their business. It's not the product that the business sells. It's a big step for them to taking a different look at how to add value to their business and be thinking about packaging it for the next owner so that they have built value. We don't always get involved in time to help people with that. A lot of times clients will already be in their 60s or whatever, and it's time to move on, or somebody has showed up at their door and said, hey, I want to buy your business, and they hadn't even thought about selling before, so they haven't had a chance to really package it to maximize their return on it. So we do what we can to put lipstick on that as fast as we can. We know what buyers are going to look for, so we can help them package their financials and clean up the filing and the paperwork so that when the buyer does come and look, they're going to be so impressed by how organized you are that it'll add 20% to the value of your business without even having you sell another widget.
Yeah, I think you're making it. I see that in our field as well. So people kind of start a business, and usually they kind of think of it as kind of a hobby or an extension of a hobby. And then something happens. They get to an inflection point where actually they have a real business. And once you get to that stage, you kind of always have to think about what, like, possibly selling the business, right? So usually you have an accountant, you usually have someone that can really kind of help you, but there's a little bit of shift of mentality, and some people never get there. But there's some common things that usually we're talking about making widgets. A lot of businesses actually don't make widgets, they're more services businesses. And people like really forget that your vendor list is actually something you could sell. Your customer list is something you could sell. So sometimes people are finding value where they never even thought that someone would actually pay for that. So
it's exactly right. It's the goodwill, right? It's their name. And so you'll see accounting firms that have still got the name, and law firms are the same, of the founder, right? Mm-hmm. Mr. Murphy at Murphy Desmond has been gone for quite some time. We're still Murphy Desmond, right? And his reputation is something that our firm can trade on in the future. And we don't make widgets. Mm-hmm. We help people.
And I can imagine, Nathan, you're the same way when it comes to your own relationship with your father and the business and continuing that on relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually personally hard to think of a business. It's become so much of my own identity. So I feel like the people that become like our shareholders and my clients, like emotionally, I feel like you have become part of the family. And so, you know, that's the kind of experience that people kind of receive. That's how I am emotionally. And if people really like that in their lives or need that connection with their finance, because, you know, it's, I'm very happy. I love what I do. I love problem solving. I love having interesting problems to work out with clients. So, actually, David and I, our fields kind of like overlay quite a bit. So both from a finance standpoint and a psychological standpoint.
Well, you guys have a great brand, right? And it's a family business, and your father really built the brand, and now you're carrying that on, right? And so keep the brand strong, keep the brand going, becomes the focus of the strategic plan, right? I can't tell you. Used to have some golf shirts that we wore in our office, and it said attorneys and counselors. And I'll bet you 90% of what I do is advising clients on whether they should do something. They'll come and say, draft a contract, and I'll ask, do we really want to? Does it make sense to? Should we? Let's look at the big picture. How does it fit in with your business? Yeah. That's the main part of my and it's same with you, right? You're talking to people about what their goals are and how do we get you there.
Yeah, I think that, well, if someone says I need a contract, you could easily whip up a boilerplate contract with them, like, okay, sign this, you're done, and, you know, walk out the door. But is it exactly what they need? So there's a lot more questions that need to have. You have to understand exactly what the clients, and then we can tailor and customize the contract or the financial plan to the client. So yeah, you're exactly right.
I can just picture, right? The client comes in and say, I've got X dollars to put in one mutual fund. Mm-hmm. And you could just do it, or you could say, let me look at the whole picture and see how that one fits and ask if we should before we even do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, and then actually both fields, just another thing that popped in my head is how things are titled, right? So in the financial planning, very important. And obviously when you're selling a business, how things are titled are also very, very important as well. So,
well, the title gets to the tax implications. And at the end of the day, you want as much left over after you sell your business for your family as you can have. And so how do you title things? How do you structure things looking ahead to your exit so that part of the planning works at the back end?
Dave, before we wrap up, what's the final thing you'd like our listeners to take away from your experience in life in making these changes?
Just do it. Sounds like a commercial for an athletic company or something. But give it a go, right? You've got an entire lifetime, and hey, if the law hadn't worked for me, I could go back to the boat business, or I could do something else. 40 wasn't too late. I thought 50 wouldn't have been too late. I had classmates that were had retired from their career and had gone to law school when they were 60. Because they wanted to be able to maybe give back a little bit and do some immigration work or other pro bono things. So, yeah, you can do this. You just don't be afraid to take the jump. Talk to other people who've done it.
Yeah. Dave, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. Really inspirational.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, another episode today. Again, if you resonated with today's episode and information and you'd like to be a guest on this show, connect with us. It's easy to do so. Visit wiscap.com. That's WISCAP.com, and send us a message. At Wisconsin Capital Management, we believe that your financial plan should support your life and not limit it. Thank you for watching.